making more money will make you more rich is a misconception. If you make more money but you just start to spend more money, then it's not making you any more rich. You got nicer stuff, you got a bigger house, but you're still in the same position that you were before. All wealth is having enough financial resources to sustain your desired lifestyle without having to go into. Sometimes we sit down with people earning like a lot of money. You got somebody who's earning like 300, 400,000 pounds a year. The demand on them is higher. These guys are working crazy hours, so they just don't have the time to focus on their financial planning. They're telling me what they're earning, and I'm like, wow, okay, you're earning a lot of dough. Like, how is it that you've got no money? Like, I just couldn't get my head around it. And that's why the design your life thing is so important, because if you can't go, you'll hear a lot of stuff where people are saying, stop buying coffees. It feels very restrictive. I much rather approach it from a point of view where rather than me, it's like a weight that gradually just gets heavier and heavier and heavier over time. The only way to deal with that is to tackle it head on. What I mean by tackle it head on is just as part of understanding sort of where you are now is understanding your relationship with money. Your freedom is just the difference between
you're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people.
Like you have to be able to be uncomfortable. Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
When you grow up in ends, you don't realize it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Atto. We've got special guests in the building today. How are you doing today, Joseph?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Atto. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm all good, man. We're saying that how lovely the weather is. Finally, we're getting some good weather, man.
Yes.
It's just,
100%.
One of them, man. Yeah.
It feels like it's been a long time grey.
I know, every day. Even this week, actually, it was raining, right?
Yeah.
It's mad. All right, so who is Joseph?
That's a big question. But essentially, look, I'm a financial planner, professional financial planner. Well, I'm running my own business now as a financial planning expert, but I'm part of a much bigger organisation.
Okay.
Family man. Yeah, I've got 2 young children.
Yeah.
One who's only 3 months old.
Wow.
So I'm feeling a little tired.
Hey, oh man.
She did keep me up last night.
Yeah.
She did keep me up last night. So, but yeah, and essentially, look, if we're talking about sort of who I am, I guess I'm on a bit of a mission really to help as many people as I can in terms of financial empowerment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sort of run my, the professional aspect of my business as well.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two parts to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, man. And I think that's what drew me to your page. I felt like is exactly what you were saying, that the fact that you're trying to help people, especially like with personal finance. I think a lot of us now know, obviously, it wasn't taught in school, wasn't taught in college, it wasn't taught in university. Even when you start getting into the working world, it's like something that you have to kind of like pick up from yourself through even mistakes or through talking to people if you're fortunate and they share the information with you. So yeah, I definitely wanted to get you on to like, talk about a lot of different topics and provide us with more information about it. But obviously, let's go back a little bit, talk about your story, right?
Yeah.
So I guess where are your parents from?
So dad's side, Ghana, so I'm half Ghanaian. On my mum's side's English, Irish, from what I know.
Okay.
from what I know. Yeah. So mixed, got a mixed heritage. Yeah.
And were you born in the UK at all?
So I was born in the UK. I was born in Essex.
Okay.
Dad's from Tottenham, North London, and mum is from Essex.
Yeah.
Hence, yeah.
What was it like? Like, obviously, it's Essex and Tottenham are different areas, to be honest. Yeah, if we're being real, right? Like,
yeah. You're right. So, do you know what? So in the early years of me growing up, even though I was born in Essex, we moved to Shepherd's Bush in West London when I was about 2 or 3.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of my time growing up there. My dad was still in Tottenham, sort of green areas. And I've always kind of just been backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
But then we moved back to Essex when I was, I'm going to say around sort of 10-ish. I can't really remember the exact time, but it was about that time. So I spent my secondary school years then in Essex.
Okay.
And a couple of primary school years as well, actually. So I think to answer your question in terms of them being different, look, they're very, very different. And for the area that I grew up in within Essex, which is a town called Harlow, it was predominantly white, right? So then coming from You know, Tottenham, Shepherd's Bush is very diverse. So it is not that it was necessarily a bad thing. It was just different.
It's just different.
It's just different.
How did you find it growing up in? Obviously, it seems like most of your upbringing was in Essex. Is that correct?
Yeah. For the upbringing, that I kind of remember most, I guess.
Essex,
yeah. So earlier childhood years was London, and then later was Essex.
Yeah. How did you find it growing up in Essex? Was it?
Yeah, do you know
Do you enjoy it? Do you like it? Not like it?
It was good. Yeah. It was good for the most part. I mean, I'm thinking about in terms of, you know, friends that I've made, the people that well, you know, most of them are still my friends today, or a lot of them. But I suppose, look, it's just a bit like you experience more. I don't want to get onto the topic of like racism and all the rest of it too much, but it's just a bit different in that aspect. Do you know what I mean? Like,
cool.
Yeah. So I think there were some battles that I faced. Excuse me. There were some battles that I faced in that respect, growing up in that area. But on a whole, I have to say, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So obviously, we spoke about offline your book, right? So in your book, Flow State Money, you say that you're not the typical financial advisor. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, I can explain why that is. So, look, I think first and foremost, I think if somebody says financial advisor, I'm probably not what springs to mind for most people.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, from that point of view, you know, I'm not your typical financial advisor. And then I guess the other aspect of this really is just because of the way that I come up into financial advice.
Yeah.
It was not the typical route.
Yeah.
It was very unconventional, in fact, and how I kind of got my role. You know, I didn't go through the whole uni route and all of that sort of stuff. So my objectives in what I'm trying to achieve as a person, I think, is very different to what another financial advisor might be, i.e. kind of the book Flow State Money, right? The reason I wrote that is because I'm coming from a certain place and I understand kind of a certain world.
Yeah.
And then I found my professional career in a completely different world where I'm now learning all of these different things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, my parents and grandparents, like, they should have known this stuff. A lot of this stuff, they should have known this stuff, but they didn't. So I think that's probably the reason why, more than anything. Yeah. Just because of the life experience that I'm bringing to it and the types of people that I'm then trying to help along the way as well. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, you know, your path to financial, you know, becoming a financial advisor. Obviously, I read your book and we spoke as well offline. So I know, obviously the watchers, listeners don't know. And I think it's a very interesting story of how you got there. So can you talk a little bit about how you became a financial advisor and like the path to it?
Yeah. I'm going to do my best not to spend too much time on this because essentially the story is quite a long one, I suppose. So I'll try and sort of cut to the chase with it. But essentially, I worked as a heating engineer. That's what I kind of trained up to be, and soon discovered that actually that kind of wasn't what I wanted to do. Not that there's anything wrong with that profession. You know, there's friends of mine that still work in that profession and do exceptionally well. It just wasn't. I didn't think it was right for me, right? And I was in a position where I felt like I needed to kind of grow as a person, and without going into the depth of kind of the family situation, there were certain people in the family that I wanted to make sure were okay from a financial perspective. So I had heard about, I'd met this guy before, but it was a family friend ultimately who worked as a stockbroker in the city. And this guy is like making really good money. He's living a certain type of lifestyle. Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, if I can maybe get like a role in that sort of thing, I don't know what I need to do that. So I just started like looking for jobs and applying. I started knocking on different doors, speaking to different people who might know people in that field and be able to kind of get me a foot in the door. Yeah. And eventually, just to kind of cut that part of it short, because there was a lot of knockbacks in that period, I approached a guy on a train who looked like a stockbroker. Yeah. And essentially I just said to him, look, you look like a stockbroker. And I think I said this to you when I spoke to you before, right? The way he looked at me, honestly, I thought that, he thought that his watch was going to go missing. I'm sure of it. But I basically just said to him, you look like a stockbroker. I'm trying to get a position in the city to work in that field. Can you sort of just help point me in the right direction? And essentially, he said, just purely for the fact that you had the confidence to come and ask me that question, he said he runs a desk and he'd be happy to interview me for it. So he asked me to come up for the interview. I didn't end up, I'm going to skip a part here again as well, just because of the length of the story. But I actually, when I went to Canary Wharf, which is where their offices were based, I couldn't get through to him on the phone. And I ended up actually approaching another two gentlemen who looked like stockbrokers and asked them where this particular place was. And they asked me why I was going there. I ended up getting into a deeper conversation with them. And it was them that actually ended up interviewing me for a currency broker role as a junior broker. And they took me up to the offices on that day. So we're going up to like, is a Citibank building in Canary Wharf. So going up to like the 32nd floor, right? Bearing in mind of kind of where I've come from and kind of the world that I'm used to. So I've walked into the office and it's just like this electric atmosphere. You know, all these, what you imagine like. Yeah,
that type,
exactly. Like, all these like double screens, like slick back hair, like the suits and all of the rest of it. And I was just like, wow, okay, this is crazy. And like the windows, I just remember all of the windows and just like looking out over London. It's amazing. So they ended up giving me a role there. And then I worked my way up. I ended up finding a position at a different company after being there for a little while, which I worked my way up in. I started doing some networking. And then I met a guy who is a financial advisor. And he said to me, I think you've got the attributes to be a good financial advisor. So I pondered on it, I considered it, and I ended up just taking a leap of faith. I had to do all these exams.
Yeah, that's what I read. Like you said, you did it in a year, and it takes a couple of years to do it, right?
Typically speaking, don't get me wrong, I failed a couple of them because I think I tried to rush through. But essentially, what was in the books, I learned a great deal from. But what I really learned a lot from was then going out and shadowing the advisors. You know, because then it's like you're in the field. All of a sudden, I'm going and having meetings with managing directors in JP Morgan, investment bankers. And like, I'm sitting on the other side of the desk thinking like they're taking advice from me. do you know what I mean? Like,
it must have really blown your mind, the fact that they like you're sitting with these guys, you're like, rah, where I've come from, I'm now managing these multi-millionaires, guys that are managing millions, billions of pounds. It's crazy.
And, do you know what people often say to me? It's all like, if they're like working in JP Morgan or, you know, like Barclays investment bank or whatever it is, like why are they taking advice from you guys? And essentially it's time. Like those guys don't have a lot of time. And do you know, like let's take a builder, for example. Typically, everybody else's house is immaculate because they go in and they do the work. And when they come home, they can't be bothered to do that.
That's true.
do you know what I mean?
That's
and it's
true.
almost like the same sort of concept.
And
I think, you know, not that they neglect it, but it just doesn't get the attention that it needs.
The intentions on making money.
They'll use the likes of us as financial advisors to help manage it. But that's just one type of client that we would we would deal with.
That's interesting. I do have a few questions later on talking about that, because I'm quite interested. The fact that you say that they don't have time, I'm like, okay, you're making all this money, but you're not buying your time back. What's going on? Are you in a little bit of a loop? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit like interesting, right? Because I feel like a lot of people on the pursuit of money, but then, and we're going to talk about it because it's one of your building blocks, is about like designing the life you want. Have they designed the life that they thought they want, or have they just progress without thinking about it? You know, it seems like everybody's got some sort of problem, right?
Do you know what? It's a brilliant question, and I'm glad you've asked that. You've asked that because I do think that there's a massive kind of, not that there's a misconception as such, but essentially like a lot of these guys that we're going in and doing this work for, like you said, so you're thinking, okay, so if they've got all this money, then how comes they haven't done the things to buy the time and all of this stuff? But you might have heard this phrase before, but it's like lifestyle inflation. So it's like the more you earn, the more you spend. And you're almost just in the same position. Look, you got nicer stuff, you got a bigger house, but you're still in the same position that you were before. Like, because essentially wherever the money goes is probably the most important thing, because it's either working for you or for somebody else, right? So if you're spending the money on things like, I don't know, cars and, you know, nice house, you're living a good lifestyle, going on nice holidays and all of this good stuff, and you leave yourself very little to kind of then put aside to build for the future. Because essentially, your freedom, let's call it financial freedom. I don't actually like that term, but that is probably the best way to describe it, is just the difference between what comes in and what goes out. And what you do with that difference is what is going to determine you buying your time back, essentially.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say ultimately is that they've got all of this money. You know, they usually have fairly decent pension funds because the companies are paying into those for them, but they're spending it.
Yeah.
They're spending it.
Okay.
They're spending it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And the design, the life you want, that we're talking about, they haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
They haven't done it. They haven't done the work to sit down and go, right, okay, so this is actually what I want. How do I use my money to achieve that specifically? Not just chuck it all in there and hope that it grows. Because that leaves you nowhere, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And it's, you know what? It's just something that I've literally just, it wasn't a pre-thought thing. It's like, as we were having this conversation, I was like, when you said that, the time thing, I was like, oh, I didn't think of it from that perspective. And yeah, it just made me think like, oh wow, okay, so is like the exact same problem that people, let's say, that's not making as much money. It's just the same problem as when you make more money, like you said, lifestyle inflation. The problem doesn't go away of time. That's still there because you haven't sat down to think about it. And I guess you haven't sat down to think about it because we're not educated on it, right? Like, if we're not educated, why would we think about it? We're not gonna do it, right? We're just gonna continue doing what we think the conventional way is, you know, which is make more money, spend more money, and then just continue
to do that.
But
essentially, if we think about the guys that you're talking about, in terms of their time as well, right? So when you start to get to certain positions in your career, from an employment point of view, if you're an employee, if you're doing a job where you're earning like big money each year, you know, sometimes we sit down with people earning like a lot of money. The requirement, the demand on them from the company is very high. It's high, much more so. Like if you've got somebody who's, and I mean this respectfully, right? So if you've got somebody who's earning like 30k a year, the demand on them is obviously going to be higher in the sense of whatever that company needs to kind of get out of them. You've got somebody who's earning like 300, 400,000 pounds a year. The demand on them is higher. So in terms of time, these guys are working crazy hours, like crazy hours. So so they just don't have the time to focus on their financial planning in the way that it needs the attention that it should have. Typically speaking.
You know what, this conversation definitely opened my eyes to
really
to a lot. Because you just don't think about it, right? I think again, when we assume people that have a lot of money, I think there's this assumption that they've got their ish together, right? They've just got it all together, right? When actually there's some aspects maybe that they haven't, like you said, they don't have the time to think about that, right? It's just about doing the job and making sure that you're doing it successfully. So
no, honestly, I know you're going to move on to your next question, but honestly, one sec. No word of a lie. When I first started having these meetings, and I'm like, they're telling me what they're earning, and I'm like, obviously I can't let this come across because it's not very professional to think, wow, okay, that's a lot of money, man. Like you're earning a lot of dough. Like, how is it that you've got no money? Like I couldn't get my head around it.
Seriously,
like I don't understand.
There are people that have no money.
They're like next to zero savings. It's like
You're
what comes in goes out.
No way.
You're talking like private school fees.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like a keeping up with the Joneses thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much you make. There's always somebody with more doing more. Do you know what I mean? And if you can't, and that's why the design your life thing is so important, because if you can't go, well, this is what I'm focusing on. It doesn't matter what that person or that person's doing.
Yeah.
Like my success is based on this, what I'm trying to achieve, as opposed to, you know, looking at other people's kind of journeys and what they're doing, so to speak. But anyway, just
that's interesting. Okay, we're definitely gonna touch back on this a little bit because I definitely want to go through the building blocks. But before that, what led you to start your own financial planning business? What was like the reason for? Obviously, it was St. James Place that you were working at before, right?
That's right.
And then, what was the reason that you kind of left that and it's like, you know, I want to do my own thing?
Do you know, there's a few reasons.
Yeah,
there's a few reasons. but the main one essentially was if you've read my book, you know about the situation with my brother, right?
Yeah.
So basically, my brother had to go into care. My youngest brother on my mum's side, he had a disability called cerebral palsy, to like the severest form, and he had a lot of other complications that come along with it as well. And he ended up having to move up and live with a family in Norwich that looked after him because they were just much better place. I think the family dynamic just meant that essentially it was very difficult for my mum. So my mission from that point was like, okay, like I don't have the financial capability to take this on, but I don't want my brother living up in Norwich with other people. Like I want him here. So my mission was just to build a home, not physically build a home, but a home big enough so that he could live with us and that we could pay for his care. Yeah. So where I was at SJP, like the setup was I was a part of a practice and so on. And given sort of the setup of that, I couldn't see how I could make that happen quickly enough. I could have still been very successful in the role there, essentially. You know, I had some great years there. And I just thought, well, if I'm going to make this happen, I need to give myself the best possible opportunity. And I took the leap too early, if I'm honest with you. I think I took the leap too early. But it was driven by this outside factor, right? So I took the leap, and essentially the idea was to try and build up my business enough so that there was enough income coming in from the business so that I was able to achieve what I just said. But again, as you read in the book, so my brother passed away a couple of years ago. So that objective's no longer sort of needed. So now I'm running the business, and you know, there's different. Obviously, I've got young children, family, and all of this stuff. So there's different reasons as to why I want to be successful with it. But that was actually the you know, if I'm being honest, that's the driving force behind me doing that. Cool. But it seems like it's still been fruitful for you, right? Even though you say you jumped too early, still you have other reasons now, right? So maybe you didn't jump as early as you thought. Well, when I say I think I jumped too early, it's just because I feel like maybe I could have taken a bit more out of the position that I was in. Maybe. I get what you mean. Because it's very different. Obviously, I was still self-employed as an advisor where I was, but it's very different running your own business. Like, you know, where you're every department. So it was an adjustment. Sales, your marketing, admin, like everything. Finances, it's everything. It's mad, isn't it? And then you think like, where am I going to find the time to do all of this stuff? But you know, you find your flow. And I mean, I'm sort of 3.5 years in now. Or just over. And how much experience do you have in like the, you know, obviously as a broker, total experience, like from broker into like financial planning and your business? About 11 years. That's a lot. Wow. About 11 years. Wow. Wow. Which is crazy to think. That's a lot. Very experienced. So let's talk about your book, because what I really liked about it is there was a aspect of it like you were talking about, like building blocks of like financial planning, right? And you have like a process that you kind of like start with, right? So the first part of it is, and again, people, I'd implore you to go and, you know, get Joseph's book. And we're not going to go through the in-depth. We're just going to talk about various parts of it so that you can, you know, encourage you to get the book, and also get you to, you know, start looking at, you know, taking control of your money. So the beginning parts of it was money, mindset, and clarity, right? And so I've got an episode actually with somebody, Laura, on money mindset, and but the money mindset part is interesting in terms of importance. Why is it important to understand what your relationship with money is from your perspective when you were writing that book? Why is it important to understand what your relationship with money is? So look, essentially, I think it's like with anything. If you're trying to change anything for the better, then you need to understand sort of where you are now, so to speak, in order to be able to make any real changes, right? As part of understanding sort of where you are now is understanding your relationship with money. And I think I mentioned in the book as well, just about like, you know, if you think back to kind of growing up with money, there's so many things from probably like the age of 4, 5 that are starting to be implanted into your mind or embedded into your mind that you're unaware of. You're completely unaware of. So you will have built up habits that you have no control over.
Yeah.
Based on, you know, whoever's looking after you, parents, you know, siblings, whatever it might be, guardians, whatever. So for a lot of people, they're just like, oh, you know, I'm just terrible with money. Like,
yeah, that is a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm just terrible with money. Like, and they don't know why. They don't understand why. You know, why is it like, literally, it's like, and I feel like sometimes for some people, it's like having too much money in their account is just like, not that it scares them, but it's almost like they try to spend it. Do you know what I mean? It's like clearing it all out. do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes I speak to people and I get it, because I feel like it's kind of the same for me to begin with. And it's like, I'm not really, you know, if I see a certain amount, I feel rich. I think, yeah, cool. Like, you know, and I think essentially understanding why your habits are that way will allow for you to then be able to kind of adjust your relationship with money. Yeah. Some people's relationship with money is probably not as bad as they think. Yeah. And some people's is probably a lot worse than what they think.
Yeah. So how does somebody go about like identifying what those, you know, relationships with money are?
So do you know what I would, and again, I'm pretty sure there's a sort of a task in the book that I put in there that I encourage people to do. And essentially, I think writing down your earliest memory of money, or earliest memories of money, and sort of what those were, and just understanding kind of, you know, how that came about and the attitude around it at home, just growing up. And then I think to write out the type of person that you are with money at this moment in time. Yeah. And then if you write out the type of person that you would like to be, or think of somebody that you know who you think, yeah, that person just seems like they're really good with money. Like, what is it that they do? Yeah. And just writing that all out. And then literally the difference between the type of person that you are and the type of person that you would need to be, you just make a list of all of the things that you would need to do to get from that point there to that point there. It's a really simple task. It's not like, you know, we're not talking about anything difficult here. And it probably seems too simple, but essentially that gap that you see and the actions that you need to take, I think then allow you to start to be able to just sort of make those differences so that you can sort of start to change that relationship and the habits that you have with it.
Love that. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's always like trying to catch yourself, especially when you're like, there's certain thoughts of certain things that you're saying, and maybe you ask other people to, if there's certain things that you say around money, they catch it and say, you know, you said this, right? Like, yeah, it's mad. So there was a misconception in your book. So you outlined 5. I'm only going to mention, I've got 2 here. I'm not going to mention all 5 because again, I want to encourage you guys to, guys and girls to read the book. So you talked about misconception 1, making more money will make you rich. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So making more money will make you more rich. Yeah. Or make you richer. Is that right?
I think you said rich. Yeah.
Yeah. But whatever. Yeah. Talking about money here, not English. Yeah. So just to outline that is a misconception. I'm not making the statement that making more money will make you more rich. I'm saying that making more money will make you more rich is a misconception. And this goes back to the point of that lifestyle inflation that I was saying to you. This goes back to that point, because essentially it's not about kind of, what's the best way to put this? It's not about the money that you make, or it is, obviously, you need to be making a certain amount of money, but it's more to do with the plan. Because I've sat down with people who are earning, you know, a lot less than others that have a much better plan. And from if we call it kind of a wealth perspective and building that, they're in a much better position. So, you know, if you make more money, but you just start to spend more money, then it's not making you any more rich. Being rich and wealthy is about having financial resources that then allow you to be able to buy back your time. Yeah. If you're then going off and just spending all of that, then you're effectively just throwing all your financial resources away.
I like the way you say it. Financial resources is true. Yeah, we don't think of it like that, right? Because it's not infinite, right? It's finite, right? In a way, right?
That's it.
Yeah. In your book as well, you mentioned about, you did a survey and 80% of the people that did that survey, they had anxiety issues with money, right? And their personal finances. And you said that you were quite surprised because it wasn't just people with lower income. It's also people who had higher incomes that was, you know, facing this. I guess, like, what did you kind of draw from that, from doing that survey?
So it was interesting because obviously after the point that I started working as a financial advisor and developing certain relationships and now getting to know certain people, I was able to do that survey across a range of different people across a number of different income brackets, which was great. And it was anonymous, so people were quite honest on it. But what I gleaned from it essentially is that the problem doesn't change. The problem doesn't change. Like if you don't change your attitude towards money, it doesn't matter how much you make, the problem doesn't change. You just have a bigger problem. You just have a bigger money problem.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? Like it's, that's what I gleaned from it. And this is where then I go into the point of, you know, the design, the life you want, and understanding what your money's for. And then of course the money allocation skills as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is very important.
Let's talk about the design your life. Because I think that's quite interesting. How does somebody go about designing the life they want? What are some of the things that they need to think about in terms of that? You know, like now they're listening right now to us and they're like, you know, what we want to now start looking at, you know, working towards that. I guess what aspects do they need to look at?
Do you know what? The way that I would go about this, and again, in the book, there's a whole kind of step-by-step thing to do on this, right? And the key thing is I think to almost think about what you would like in your life from all different points of view. You know, places you want to go, people you want to meet, the people you want to help. Yeah. I don't know, communities you want to be a part of, whatever it is. You know, there's a nice list in there as well. So we can go in there and use this list as a prompt. Without money being an object. Just imagine money is not an object. Just write down everything. You know, off the back of all of these prompts, write down everything that you would like to sort of achieve. And then you can kind of take a look at, okay, how realistic is that I'm going to be able to achieve all of these different things in my lifetime? And then you can start to sort of pluck out the things that actually, you know, take priority over the others. And then essentially, once you've done that, now you know what's vitally important to you. You can then go and take a look and see, what is this going to cost me? What's this going to cost me every year? Okay, fine. So this is going to, in order for me to achieve this life, this is going to cost me X amount each year. Where am I now? Okay, so I'm in a position where actually, you know, I can pay for this each year now. I now need to use my spare money that I have to be working towards me being able to do that without now having to go and work for it. Yeah. Which then comes down to investments and, you know, tax efficiency and all of that good stuff. Yeah. And I think essentially at the point that you've done that, I think you're kind of very clear on what it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay. And it's then somewhat designed, right? Yeah. It's designed, like every decision that you make is meaningful, it's purposeful. Yeah. And then if you're and then I think if you're in a position whereby, I'm just going to add one last thing here, Atto, you're in a position whereby you're like, okay, so I can't afford that lifestyle now, it's what I want, then you need to go and obviously work on yourself and learn a higher paying skill, essentially, in order to be able to generate that level of money to be able to do that thing, right? Yeah. But it's just a great starting point to be able to kind of get you moving in the right direction. You know what I mean? It's almost like a magnet. Once it's there, it's almost like a magnet. You know what I mean? All of your actions that you take are leading you to that point. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Sorry for the long answer.
No, it's not a long answer. I love it because it's exactly like you're saying. It's a plan. It's a plan towards what you want your future to look like, right? And I think it's very important for us to understand where we're going, what we're trying to do, right? What is a kind of life we want to look like. It's like a more detailed version of, not a canvas. What's that thing that it's not whiteboarding, vision board. It's like a more detailed version of you got your vision board, but then, okay, how do you actually get to the vision board, like numbers wise? It's quite important. Another thing that I liked about your book was talking about like your current situation. And I feel like not enough of us do that. Not enough of us like just sit down and be like, what's the current situation with us? What's our incomings? What's our outgoings? You know, we have a budget, but like realistically, do we actually go through and understand, okay, where we kind of at with everything? Because I think right now in the world, right, it's very fast moving. You know, you might have debts all over the place. You might have pensions all over the place. You might be fortunate to have salary coming all over the place. So I guess, what's the importance of understanding your current situation, and how do you go about like just doing that? Do you have to spend like hours doing that? Do you spend an hour? Do you like get somebody to help you to do that?
Look, yeah, I think if you get somebody to help you to do it, it's going to cost you, right? So you just have to bear that in mind. But in some cases, if you're not the sort of person that's going to get it done, then that's probably, it's going to be worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
Because it essentially, again, like I say, you can then, off the back of that, usually start making some meaningful decisions.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, if you're going to do this stuff yourself, like, there's some amazing budgeting spreadsheets out there and all of that good stuff. I don't like calling it budgeting because I feel like it sounds restricting. I think you gauge that from my book.
Yeah.
But essentially, it is budgeting. I just think that maybe it needs to be framed in a bit of a different way.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I'll be honest with you, when you first do this, it's going to take some time. Because you're collating a lot of information that's going on for you at this current moment in time. So it's going to take you a bit of time to do. I don't know, call it an hour and a half or whatever it might be. But then once you've got that snapshot of assets, you know, anything you own, properties, you know, rental properties, and then you've got your liabilities. So there's all your debts, including mortgages, etc. You're going to understand kind of what your net worth is ultimately. So you're going to understand what your financial position is. If it's in the red, then look, obviously you've got some work to do to get yourself out of the red initially, right?
Okay.
If you're in the green, then great. But you want to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then you want to have a look at, and again, this sounds very, very obvious, but not everybody does it. It's just looking at your income versus your outgoings. And just
a lot of people don't do it because they're scared.
Do you know what? I think you're right. It's just
facts. That's
ostrich,
just
right? Just bury your head in the sand.
Yeah. It's easier to do that than, you know, and sorry, I know I'm thinking your fault, but
no,
it just brought me to a time. I remember there's sometimes in my younger days when I would go out at night in Shoreditch and whatnot. And
I feel like I know exactly what you're gonna say, but yeah, go on.
And you go out, you get excited, you spend hundreds or whatever, not 200s, but in the hundreds, right? You're buying up drinks. And the next day you just kind of cringe. You won't check your account.
Don't look.
Pretending like it didn't happen. That you didn't spend the money. You know you did. And you're kind of just wishing it away, right?
Yeah.
Like we all go through it, you know, is the truth. It's just that cringe and feel like, oh, you didn't. And you just have to face it sometimes, you know? So
I think you're right. I think you're right. And it's a very good point. And you know, I mean, you use the example of going out and, you know, buying up drinks, but there's lots of other things that people will do where then they just think, oh, do you know what? I'm just not even going to look at it and just hope that everything goes through this month. And then, you know, if a notification comes through, then, you know, I'm getting paid in the next 5 days. So I should be able to just deal with this stuff. Like, and it's just a stressful situation, right? I think at the point, there's going to be two types of people, Atto. You're going to have the people who are ready to face it head on and tackle it and deal with it and understand that actually, you know, my situation is not great right now, but I now know what I need to do to sort it out.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have the people like you mentioned that it's just like, just won't face it, can't face it, like don't want to. Yeah. But there'll come a stage, something usually happens. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, I better start looking at this now. Yeah. So, but the earlier the better, obviously.
Definitely, right? Definitely. And that takes me on to something that you mentioned in the book as well, money allocation. I really like that word. Maybe we can, you know, take that over budgeting. But so you said that it's essential for financial success. What is money allocations and what lessons can you share to help people become better with allocating their money?
Yeah, okay. So money allocations, there's a saying somewhere that somebody said to do with like budgeting or money allocation.
Yeah.
Where it's telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah,
that's
like
a really
that.
nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Because that is essentially all it is. Right, so you're sitting down, and the way that I look at things is like, if I break things down, so I know that I'm in a situation where I've got a young family, right? If something happens to me, they're going to be in a detrimental situation, or it's going to be a detriment to them, not only for the fact that I'm not here, but financially. So I need to make sure that I protect that. So some of my money is allocated towards protecting myself and my family financially. That's been allocated to that. So that's going to be my protection premiums, right? So I'm not thinking about it from the point of view of, I've got to pay these premiums. I'm thinking about the importance of that. This all goes into, when we're talking about the design your life, there's going to be a certain cost. I'm not thinking about trying to just reduce those costs. I'm trying to think about getting myself in a position where whatever that is, that thing costs, I get myself to a position where I can cover that so that I'm now living the designed life that I want, right? So another thing that I know that I need to do is live today. I need to enjoy myself today, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to put some money into a particular pot. So people can use Monzo and that type of thing where you can section out the money.
Yeah.
And that money is there for me to be able to enjoy my time today. I also know that Joseph in, let's call it 30 years time, is going to need some money too.
True that.
He's going to need some money.
Yeah.
And, at that point, let me say 20 years time, because I'm not really looking to work for another 30 years.
For real. You're retiring early,
listen,
yeah?
hopefully, that's the objective.
For real,
right?
man.
Listen, I designed my life, so it better work.
Yeah.
But essentially, let's call it 20, 25 years, whatever it is. I know he's going to need some money as well, right? So I need to allocate some of my money to the pots that are growing for that.
Yeah.
There's going to be potential things that come up that are going to be big expenditures that are, unexpected. A typical one that people use is like, I don't know, the boiler breaks or whatever. Yeah. It's nothing more annoying than having to shell out like,
I know,
1,500 quid to sort all of that stuff out.
Yeah.
It's probably more than that now. I don't know. But so you allocate a certain amount of money into what people call an emergency fund.
Yeah.
Right. So it might be like 3 months worth of your outgoings or whatever it might be. So this is what I'm talking about is now, there's a number of other things that I can talk about here, but essentially what I'm saying is that every month that your money comes in, you already know where that's going, and you're going, okay, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there. This is the money I'm going to enjoy myself with now. This is money that's going to allow me to enjoy myself later. My family's protected. If anything goes wrong, that pot's there. And the feel around your money it just transforms completely. Like that feeling of anxiety, I think, just dissipates. So I think essentially money allocation is telling your money where to go. And what I was just talking about there in terms of understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then putting your money, or the little portions of money that need to go to those different areas every month, go to those different areas. And that's it. You're within your means then as well.
That's the thing, man. It's like you said in the book, money is a tool, and if you see it like that, it's you control it, you don't let it control you, right?
Correct.
I feel like you let it control you when you get anxious about it. At that point, if you're anxious about it, it's controlling you.
That's right.
But if you've got the plan, like you say, then you're not going to be anxious about it because you know what exactly you're doing. You're controlling it. It's not controlling you at that point, right? So there's no anxiety. You know exactly what's going to happen. You've got your debt repayments here, like you said. You've got your pot for the future, like you say. You got your pot for now. So why would you be stressed about it? You're doing exactly as you planned. But I think, like you say, because we haven't, it's the lack of education, because we've all not been educated on it. We get anxious about it and we don't understand why, because it's just a gap of our ignorance, right? This is not a subject that we've spoken about. So that's why it's very important for us to have these conversations so that we can recognize this is why we feel anxious about money, right? Our relationship with money, because we don't have a plan and things like that. So very, very important. So I wanted to talk about debt, getting out of debt. That's the thing that people struggle with as well. So I was looking at stats, right, from, I think it was a money charity. It's from a money charity. And so total unsecured debt per UK adult in December 2023 was 4,123. It's not crazy amounts. It's still a decent size of debt. It's not to me, I wouldn't say that's something on average to be really worried about, because it's manageable. I think you can get yourself out of it. I guess, what are some of the typical reasons that people get into debt from your understanding as you know, being a financial advisor? What are some of the reasons that people get there?
Yeah, so look, I think there's a number of reasons why somebody might get into debt, right? And some of the reasons will be, you know, that they had no other choice, essentially.
Yeah.
And for those reasons, you know, it's difficult because you don't want to be too harsh, right? Because people are in certain financial situations and have to make certain decisions.
100%, yeah. But
then there's the kind of keeping up with the Joneses, let's call it.
Yeah.
And look, we all want nice stuff. We all want to, you know, kind of enjoy our lives a certain way and so on. So I think for me, for what I've seen, it's just lack of patience.
Okay.
For wanting the thing now.
Yeah.
Because effectively you can build up to the point to afford that thing that you've gone and just spent X amount on, right? So I think lack of patience. The other thing is probably a lack of understanding of what that debt is actually going to mean for you and what the cost of the borrowing of that money actually is over time.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I think those are probably the main reasons.
Okay, cool. And obviously, debt is a system. There is a debt system. The government's in debt. People are always going to be in debt. That's not going to ever.
We
go
was
away.
referring to bad debts then, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes,
fine.
exactly.
Okay,
yes, we're referring to. So it's funny that you say that, because that brings me on to my next question, which is, not all debt is bad, right?
Yes.
There are some good debt. So what are like some of the examples of like those good debts, basically?
Yeah, so understanding the difference between good and bad debt is very important. And look, the most obvious one to use and the easiest one, of course, is, you know, like a mortgage on a buy-to-let property, because you're leveraging.
Yeah.
Right? So you're using that debt to buy an asset which is producing you an income and hopefully some growth over time as well.
Yeah.
So that debt is now effectively become, well, it's purchased you an income producing asset, right? So that in itself, so when you're borrowing against assets or income producing assets would be deemed as, you know, a good debt.
Yeah.
So to speak,
Exactly, like you say, right? And I think Elon Musk, I know he's not people's favorite people, but he did something similar, right? I'm not advising this to people, but he basically, to buy Twitter, right? He loaned money from the bank. I think he sold some shares and stuff like that. But he definitely loaned money, so he owes a debt there. But Twitter's giving him income, and so there's a smart way, like you say, to either use debt to, it looks like, to get income, or to maybe, like, you know, like how we go to university, we get a student loan. Some people consider it bad debt because it's coming out of your salary every month. Some people say it's good debt because, look, he's allowed me to, you know, triple my income for whatever reason, right? So actually, it's a good thing.
That one very much depends on what you end up doing after uni, right?
If you actually make money.
If
you don't, you're like, that's a bad debt. That's a bad debt for life, right?
I had a good time, but
it's not worth it for real. And that's the thing, again, right? That it's so, why these kind of lessons are so important, even at the stage where you're going to make, like you say, you're going to uni. That's a big financial decision that none of us was educated on, none of us was informed on, right?
Yeah.
I feel like my generation was like, it was still like the $3,000, so again, manageable. Now it's $9,000 per year. So what we talk about, 27 just for tuition, not talking about living costs. So some of them 60,000 coming out for life. Is like, wasn't informed about, okay, look guys, if you want to, you know, study at uni, you're gonna come out with a 75,000, you know, pound debt. Are you okay with this? That conversation have happened. It was just like, just go to uni. Can you imagine? It's mad, right? So it's man, it's talking about, like, you know, debt. Obviously, it can have a toll on mental health, right? So how can people, like, stop worrying about debt What are some of the steps that someone can, follow to start working on getting themselves slowly out of debt?
Okay, so look, I think so. I'm not a debt repayment expert by any means, right? So what I'm going to share here is more so from a little bit from my professional experience, but more so from my personal experience, because you've read the book, you understand that I climbed my way out of debt, right? Which was horrendous, if I'm honest with you. But essentially, like, you have to tackle it head on.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. I think what we're talking about earlier about, people being scared to look at their bank statements, people being scared to look at the fact, what is that level of debt now? And they bury their head in the sand, just hoping that it will go away.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that debt it's like a weight that gradually just gets heavier and heavier and heavier over time. And to the point that eventually, it's going to cripple you, right? The only way to deal with that is to tackle it head on. And I think once you've done that, I think the steps and what I mean by tackle it head on is just sit down and look at it, understand where you are with it, what's got to be paid back, the interest, yada, 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 right? Whatever it is that's coming along with that. So understand exactly what position that you're in with it. And then I think that there's a strategy that's used. It's called the debt snowball. I think a guy, Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, was the guy that kind of come up with this, and that's kind of the approach that I took with it, essentially. And that's ultimately clearing off the smallest debt first, regardless as to what the interest rates are, just because of the level of achievement that you will feel and the encouragement that it will give you to keep on paying off those debts, right? Yeah. So it's taking a bit of a different perspective with it. And then what you do is the money that you've now freed up from not having to pay that debt back anymore, you direct that money also towards maybe the next debt that you've got. This is if you've got more than one debt, like let's say you've got multiple credit cards, right? And then it snowballs. It effectively just snowballs, and then before you know it, the debt's cleared. But in terms of what you're saying about stop worrying about it, what I think is at the point that you've established, okay, so this is the amount that's got to go towards paying this debt back. Get rid of the cards.
Okay. So get rid of them. Chop them up.
Just chop them up. Get rid of the cards.
You got to be drastic, man. Sometimes
you got to be drastic. Get rid of the cards. And then I think once you've set that on, like, it's automated to now be paying that back, forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it. Just let it do its thing and work on either, a higher earning skill that's going to help you to produce more income, or work on just increasing what it is that you already have. Set it, forget about it. That's now doing what it needs to do, and just work on building. That's it. Essentially.
Okay.
That's the approach I took.
Okay. I love that. And I think it's definitely like very important lessons, talking about that, right? So obviously I've had lots of conversations with people building wealth, like, through business, which I think is, that's very well documented. But through the 9 to 5, is there a way for people to build wealth with their 9 to 5? Is that possible, should we say?
It is. It's very possible. Okay. It's very, very possible. And I think that, again, this comes down to, having to be kind of realistic with your lifestyle. Because essentially, when I was talking about the difference between your income and your outgoings, and whatever that is left over is kind of the freedom gap, let's call it. Because whatever you do with that additional money is going to determine how quickly that comes. For the vast majority of people that I've worked with, I'm talking about my clients now as well. So a lot of my clients that I've worked with, essentially it's been like a slow build. Over time. These are employed people, and they're just contributing. They've taken a look and seen, okay, the companies are contributing this much into my pension. I can contribute this much, and they're going to match it. So I'll take advantage of that. And then they're looking at, all right, so how much more would I need to contribute in order to be able to stop working by a certain point in time? They understand what that difference is. And then usually this is where you need to work with an advisor to be able to kind of calculate exactly what this is going to mean, because you're taking into account growth rates, taking into account inflation and all of these different things. And then it's making regular contributions into investments. of course, different people are going to have different attitudes to risk, so the money might grow at different rates and that sort of thing. But essentially, as long as you're feeding that pot on a regular basis, and it's enough, then you can build yourself up to a wealthy position. Essentially, all wealth is having enough financial resources to sustain your desired lifestyle, not anybody else's, your desired lifestyle, without having to go into to exchange your time for money. That's all it is.
I love that. That's it. The key: exchange your time for money, and that's why I think
all right, Siri, calm down.
Siri, listening to us, and that's the key of the thing that you were saying before, right? Of like, you know, some of your clients are still work, they don't have time, right? And I think that's very interesting. You know, on the flip side of that, you know, some people's approach to building wealth or reaching their financial goals is to live frugally.
Yeah.
So I know, and again, you mentioned it in the book, right? About like, you know, sometimes that can seem restrictive and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on, you know, building wealth through frugal living?
Do you know what? The idea of frugality, frugal living, actually, I mean, because I think what I talk about, what you're referring to is where I'm saying basically, like, you'll hear a lot of stuff where people are saying, you know, stop buying coffees.
Yeah, and avocados.
Yeah, and
you can't get a house because you're eating too much avocado, stuff like that. Yeah, them kind of messages. Yeah.
To me, that feels a little bit restrictive. You start to feel entrapped, like I can't enjoy anything. I can't do anything, right? So I much prefer to approach it. You can still be frugal doing this. I'm not saying that you're not going to be frugal, because essentially I think, you know, frugal living is just living within your means and being sensible with your money, which ultimately means that you're building good habits around it and able to make good decisions around, you know, do I need those avocados this week? I don't know, right? Whatever it might be. So I have nothing against kind of frugal living, but what I do feel like is that when people are given this message of like, you know, not buying the coffees and doing all of this stuff, is like, is the entrapped feeling that it kind of puts around it. It feels very restrictive. So when I talk about kind of the money allocation skill side of things, and I'm talking about kind of the design your life aspect of things, I much rather approach it from a point of view where it's like, rather than me kind of just cutting back everything it is that I possibly can with this money that I have available to me now, is working out what it is that I actually want and then building up towards being able to achieve that, so to speak.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you're not going to necessarily be frugal, right? Your style of living might be somewhat frugal. Some people are naturally like that. But like, if you're somebody that enjoys cycling, for example, and that's your thing. I don't know why I've used that as an example. I don't even know anybody that cycles. But yeah, just as an example.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, fine. So I'm gonna live frugally. I'm gonna budget all of my money, and I don't really need to cycle. You know, it's not a necessity. So I'm gonna cut that out. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like a way to live for me. Did you understand what I mean?
I agree. I think it's about balance, and I think that's where people cringe about budgets, because they think it's like you say, it's like entrapment, is restrictive, when it's not that, right? It's about, like you say, it's about more control. It's about control.
Control, yeah.
That's what it is. Control, not minimizing yourself. It's about control, which is, I think that's important to have a handle on it.
Yeah.
So in terms of lessons, you know, from your client, what like money lessons and non-money lessons have you learned from your clients? Especially the ones that, you know, make a lot of money. Obviously, it could be positive or negative lessons. It's not always positive.
Yeah.
You mentioned one time. That was a very important one.
Time? Oh,
yes. You mentioned that. That's a lesson, right?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So you're saying one money lesson?
Oh no, money and non-money lessons.
Non-money lesson.
Yeah.
Okay. So time would be a non-money.
I technically, yeah, I think so. Yeah. To me, it is. Yeah.
Just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. That's all. Okay. The money lesson side of things is probably, and again, this might be somewhat obvious. People might already know and understand and think this, but this is certainly something that I learned. I think is just about it not being about the amount of money and what it looks like from the outside.
Okay.
Because, like nice cars, nice watches, nice house, all of this good stuff. And not being fooled by that.
Okay.
Into thinking that, like that then necessarily means a person is wealthy, because it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that. Even if they do have a good job and they're earning lots of money, it doesn't mean that. Because if they can't sustain that by the time they, want to decide to stop working, then, in my view, that's not wealthy.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I learned from a money point of view, which I think was a very important lesson for me, because, growing up, we probably have somewhat similar-ish backgrounds, right? Growing up, you grow up around people who really, they didn't have all of that stuff. So when I'm looking at that, to me, that's like, wow, like crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sometimes I speak to my younger brother, and I was saying to him before, like, one of my pals, I think the car that they had was like a Golf. And I thought that was like that big money car. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the point I'm getting to is like, in my mind, I just assumed that people that had nice stuff just were in a certain position, when that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost don't let that like impact you and kind of throw you off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In thinking that it's not possible for you to achieve, so to speak.
Yeah.
The non-money lesson, I don't know if this counts as a non-money lesson as such, but something that I did learn from a client was that the riches, like trying to get rich quick, isn't like there's no point, essentially, is what he was saying to me.
Yeah.
Because he believes that the riches are in the journey of the trying to. He says, like, when he kind of looks back, like that's where a lot of his riches are. Like, he has the financial riches now, and he says it's amazing. Don't get me wrong. He wouldn't like give that up necessarily, but you don't have to do it quick.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it quick.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people's decisions end up being sort of thrown off, or they make rash decisions based on feeling like they need to achieve it like yesterday.
Yeah.
I know that I have done that.
Yeah.
100%
I think
I've
we're
done
all
that.
guilty of feeling like we want it now, right?
Yeah. That's it. And that's something that he says. I don't know if that counts as a non-money lesson, but I feel like it was quite a valuable one for me to learn, especially from someone who's older than me and very successful, not only with his family, but also financially as well. Yeah. Yeah. So
goes back to not letting money control you. Right?
Yeah.
Right? The speed is because you're letting it control you. And I'm not saying this from a place of, I'm not saying that this doesn't, I think it affects all of us. So it's things that we just got to recognize. So it's been an amazing conversation with you, Joseph. Thank you so much for, just sharing like, the insights from your side of the table, talking, through parts of your book, talking through your journey. I think it's very like important again for us to continuously have this conversation, because we just got to remind ourselves as well. It's very, very insightful. Where can people find you if they want to, follow you, reach out to you, and more?
Yeah, so I think probably the best place is probably Instagram.
Okay.
The is a very simple handle. It's at Joe Financial Planning. Yeah. So you can go on there. Yeah. I mean, if anybody was open to look into any of the stuff, there's a couple of free resources as well. In the link in the bio, it's like a link tree, which then just takes you through to be able to access certain bits and bobs and whatever as well. So yeah, it's all there.
Okay, amazing. And do you have any final words for the watchers and listeners?
Final words for the watchers and listeners. Yeah. Why are you going to throw me on the spot like
that? I always give everybody the final word. Everybody always gets the final word. Yeah.
Okay. So, final words. Let's go back to that, what we said about deciding where the money goes rather than wondering where it went. That's the final words.
Okay. I love that. Yeah, man. You know what? Yeah, there's a couple of bars that you've literally said. I definitely appreciate it, especially your wealth example. I really love the financial resources, because I think it makes it, because sometimes I think with money, a lot of people have to the cringe thing, just like with budget. I think that's cringe. The fact that you say financial resources is true. That's what it is. It's a resource, right?
Yeah.
It's a finite resource, like anything else that we have in life. There's other resources that we have, right? Energy is a finite resource. We can't just we can't run forever, right? We got to recharge and then go again. So money is a similar concept, and I think like when you think of it in that way, it kind of changed your perspective. Actually. So yeah, no, it's very, very important. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the podcast, and we'll see you in next week's episode.